Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you all, and thank you so much for the presentations that we've heard so far. And they both relate, obviously, to the continuing question of more people coming onto the streets and more people becoming homeless as a result of some of the things that we're talking about just in those presentations. I chair the Homelessness Faith Network for Greater Manchester. I sit on Andy Burnham's programme board, and I'm also a trustee of the Greater Manchester Mayor's Charity. So since lockdown, I've been pretty much engaged full-time in relation to our response with regard to this. And I've got to say that the faith sector, and church in particular, has been massively engaged in this response. And I'm really grateful for everybody. And I can see a few of my friends on this call who are just completely engaged with this in the same way as me. We've had to mobilise single self-contained emergency accommodation really rapidly and provide support to perhaps one of the highest risk groups in society, those who have been sleeping rough and those who have been experiencing homelessness. We had to procure hotels, guest houses and other accommodation really quickly so that we could make sure that everyone was kept safe. It just wasn't fair for people to be in a place which wasn't able to have social distancing, so we had to work fast. We identified that we thought we'd have to deal with about 1,000 people across GM, and we tried to get some money from government to help us with regard to that. In the end, we've probably dealt with about 1,700 people within that first group of those who are rough sleeping or experiencing homelessness. There are some other groups that we've been seeking to serve, the group that relates to those who are potentially coming into homelessness, those who are in unsupported temporary accommodation, those who are sofa surfing. And of course, that became more complicated with the new rules. And future homeless groups, so people who might be evicted from asylum accommodation, people leaving prison early, people discharged from hospital, and people who will experience domestic abuse, as we've just been hearing. So obviously, the number is significantly more than 1,700. We've had to make a lot of our day centres and homeless charities repurpose themselves because they weren't able to function during this most acute part of the COVID crisis. But thankfully, they've been massively engaged in food preparation and delivery to the hotels and guest houses and onto other places. Non-face-to-face support has continued into those situations. And there's also been a lot of well-being and welfare interventions, as well as some outreach onto the streets, because not everybody came in, and some people have unfortunately abandoned or had to be excluded, and so are back onto the streets, which is a very worrying situation. But because we've been able to mobilise as quickly, we were ahead of the curve in relation to the government's policy of everyone in. And this has given us what is being referred to as a change moment. So if I try and share my screen now, this is what's happened during the COVID emergency response. We've had to make some necessary structural changes really quickly. Some of this at a central government level, some of this at a local government level. So we've got immediately accessible single accommodation. We've got at the moment an end to evictions. We've got at the moment some increases in government income support. At the moment we have housing and other needs seen as a health intervention. We've got procurement responsive to need rather than the traditional commissioning, which took some time to obtain. And we've also got authorities, local authorities and central city region authorities, and also all of the sectors working in partnership. That's where we are now. And in a sense, I would ask the question, why do we have to go back to anything different? Why is it not possible for us to ensure that all of these things are still there within the new future so that no one is left homeless and we're able to build back better with all of these things in place? That's a very idealistic thing for me to say, and it's clear that a lot of these things centrally will just drop. There'll be more evictions. There won't be the same level of income support. Health will not be able to be quite as integrated in what we're doing. That's the fear, that we end up going back to a broken system. And one of the things that we're doing within our Homelessness Action Network is to ask the question, well, what do you want to see in this new time? And we're doing that across 3 different time periods. We're doing it in relation to the 0 to 2 months, this immediate operational period. We're doing it between the 0 to 12 months, this living with COVID period. Then we're doing it in the 0 to 12 months plus. How do we build back better? What are we going to have to bring into place? And clearly we need to integrate accommodation, health, and support so that the people that we're dealing with here, and these are people, not numbers, the people that we're dealing with have got the right level of health and other support, as well as a proper place for them to stay. We're going to have to do an awful lot to make sure we've got an increase in housing stock, because at the moment we just haven't got those move-on accommodation places. So a lot of work has to be done in relation to that. Maybe it will require, as Andy Burnham was saying this morning, into our network, maybe some big social housing construction from maybe a public service vehicle that would be able to be engaged to do that, which would bring the opportunity for construction jobs into the mix. Maybe it would be, as I've boned on about for so long, our faith sector putting up some of its redundant properties into the mix so that they could be used for this sort of situation. Maybe it could be that people like Green Pastures could be engaged at a much higher level within Greater Manchester, where they're actually buying a property and a church then comes to support it. Maybe, as Caritas are suggesting at the moment through Sir Peter Fahy, we actually have community support of homeless people in the same way as we have community support of refugees coming from Syria. There's a whole sense in which this gives us the opportunity as the church and as a social action network to say, this is what we want to see, this is what we're going to contribute into the mix. And I'm hoping that as a result of this presentation, that some of you who wouldn't have put homelessness on your list of things that you are engaged with would see that you are part of an integrated system of support that needs to be in play to ensure that we don't have people left homeless and we actually can build back better. Because I'll tell you this, there's going to be a second wave of homelessness as a result of this. We've already seen it. We thought there were 1,000, there were 1,700. We know there's going to be a whole set of mass evictions once the government change their, inverted commas, soft policy with regard to that. We know there's going to be significant prison releases. There's going to be a loss of jobs out of this COVID, isn't there? It's all very well to say go back to work, but if your employer's not ready for you to do that, you're out of a job, and then for maybe you're out of a house. There's going to be domestic violence increase, 43% is what we're talking about. So we need to be working really strongly about this. We want to be making sure that we're aware of the outreach requirements to those who are on the streets today in Manchester and in Greater Manchester for their human rights to be affected. We're also wanting to do special work with regard to no recourse to public funds, to women and to young people. There's a lot for us to do and we're never going to be able to do it on our own. It needs to be a real whole society approach to it. And I really pray that Mosaic Justice Network, even the ones that are not involved in homelessness, would also be able to make that clarion call to the church that we need to be more engaged, even more engaged than we are at present.